Hello, everyone. My name is Ole Kagan, and I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator with LA County Library, and I welcome you to Work Ready, Managing Stress, Compassion Fatigue, and Burnout. And now I'd like to tell you about the Work Ready program. Work Ready started in December of 2020 with the purpose of helping people get a job, improve their work situation, and plan a more sustainable career path. We do that in two ways. Number one is we lend out laptops and Wi-Fi hotspots for 6-week loans out of 27 library locations, breaking down one barrier to applying for a job and getting online training. And number two, we provide virtual events just like this one on a great variety of work-related topics, from basics like resumes, cover letters, and interviews, to deep dives into various careers and other subjects that help you succeed at work, including compassion fatigue. And you can see over 50 of those past classes at any time by clicking the work and career, clicking the link to get to the work and career playlist on our YouTube channel. I'm going to post that in the chat for you right now so you can peruse what we have going on YouTube. And of course, the Work Ready program is made possible due to funds provided by the American Rescue Plan. Now, before we get going with today's event, I also want to let you know what we have coming up next for Work Ready, and that is Work Ready, Acing the Interview. That's going to be on Tuesday, October 24th at 11 a.m. in a few weeks. Also on a Tuesday, also at 11 a.m., inspirational speaker and corporate interviewer Christy Dimitrakis will be here to prepare you to prepare and nail that interview. I'm going to go ahead and post information about that in the chat as well, and you can sign up for that right now, and you'll get an email reminder the day before the program. And if you're interested in more virtual or in-person events from the LA County Library, you can go to our library website at lacountylibrary.org, and on the top right-hand side, you can click Events, and that'll take you to all of our events, kids, teens, adults, older adults, events for everyone, and all, of course, totally free. And if you are only interested in virtual events like this one, you can hover over that link, so lacountylibrary.org, hover over that link, you've got virtual programming dropdown, click on that, and you'll see just the Zoom events, also for all ages and for a variety of interests. All right. And now let's get going with today's event. Work Ready, Managing Stress, Compassion Fatigue, and Burnout. And our host and moderator for today is Liz Moeller. Liz is a career coach and a frequent Work Ready presenter. She's done programs on resumes and a whole bunch of other topics. And today she will be introducing and helping out with the Q&A for our speaker. So, Liz, the stage is yours.
Oh, thank you, Oleg. Hello, everybody out there in the comfort of your own home, or maybe you're driving and you're listening to this with audio, or maybe you're listening to the recording. But anyway, we are here ready to support you. And I'm super excited today because I get to introduce a fellow coach. Sometimes through my affiliate networks with the International Coach Federation, I come across really smart, sharp, wonderful people, and I like to work with them. And sometimes it's the coach that needs coaching, and it's the coach that needs the compassionate coach. And so today I'm very fortunate to have Anders with us because he is dialing in from, I think, Oregon, although I know he's working at a conference somewhere. Maybe he can tell us a little bit about that. He's known to be up in Alaska on occasion. That's where he studied and really got to be an expert through a university program, which he can tell us a little bit about. I think that was the MBA program. I also know that his compassion fatigue background is backed up with some studying that he did at the Stanford University School of Medicine. So he's truly an expert in this. And I also know that he's a yoga instructor, not just a yoga aficionado, but he actually teaches yoga. And he teaches it in such a way that he can teach everything from beginners. We talk about our kids and making sure that our kids don't have a lot of stress as they enter high school and college and beyond. But he also works with professionals, and he also works specifically with teachers. And so this is a chance for us to be taught by one of the best, And so I'm really happy to introduce Anders, and I will be monitoring the chat because this program is going to be interactive. We are here to make this come alive. And for those of you that have watched my networking workshops, or you've seen me do some of my other interview workshops, the Road to Job Search Success, we want to make sure we answer your questions. So please make sure you put your questions in the Q&A. And if you hear something that resonates with you, you could put a comment in the chat. And we'll actually take a break at about a halfway point to kind of address some of those questions. And so if it's a general question that benefits everybody, we'll shout it out. We may try to text back an answer for you to help you out. But without any further ado, I would love to turn it over to Anders and let him introduce himself a little bit more fully and get us started. Welcome, Anders.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you so much for those very kind words. I will resist the label expert because I think you know, as we're all the experts in our own lives, maybe that one I'll claim, but there's always so much more to learn, and I think I'm only beginning to scratch the surface of what's really possible here. So I'm gonna share my slides. Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here and for giving me the opportunity to speak and to share about a topic that has been growing in my life and over my career, and maybe I'll explain that a little bit. But there's the topic. So let's see. So I work with my wife in a small business. Yes, we are located in Eugene. Today, I happen to be in beautiful Santa Barbara, California, so maybe not that far away from many of you. My wife and I, we have, she comes from counseling and education. I come from business and healthcare, and we pool our knowledge and our intentions really around making workplaces better and helping people deal with the stress of work or of workplaces, and maybe just generally trying to improve well-being in the workplace, both organizational well-being and individual well-being. So I work as a leadership coach, is maybe how I usually introduce myself at various levels of leadership. I work with people in government roles and healthcare roles and early childhood education roles. I came through a background as a project manager or team lead, working on improvement projects and change work in healthcare, which I've done for about 20 years. And over the last 5 to 6, 7 years, I've been working also in the area of early childhood, childcare, Head Start, and those kind of organizations. Certainly intervention, working with both organizations and individuals. And I'm a long time yoga student, and I teach some on the side, and I love what yoga shows me what I can do, or what we can do, really, and increasingly it's influences much of my other work. And so we're gonna play a bit with that, and maybe just jumping off from there. I don't know what kind of a day you've had so far. Maybe it's been a great day, maybe it's not been a great day, but whatever you encountered today, that might still be processing a little bit, and there might still, if you will, be a part of you that's still stuck in that moment, whether good or bad or neutral. And so I'd love to invite you to just fully arrive. Welcome, we're glad you're here. Truly, we are. Don't forget to breathe. We breathe usually just automatically, but maybe pause for a moment to notice your breath. And so I'll take you through 3 simple exercises that I use in almost all my yoga classes. I just call them the 3 fundamentals. So if you would, in whatever shape you're in, standing or sitting, make contact, feel the support. Feel the seat of your chair, or feel the floor, feel the bottom of your feet, or feel your seat, maybe your seat back. Feel the surfaces that are supporting you, and maybe even pressing gently down to increase that sense of grounding or stability. And then turn to your breath. Let your body mostly just breathe naturally. Sometimes we automatically begin to shape the breath when we turn attention to it, and that's okay too. But you might allow your exhale to lengthen. So find yourself coming to a longer exhale, not a forceful long exhale, but where you're pushing the breath out, but just letting the exhale lengthen. And then you might relax your throat and your face. So all the little muscles around your throat, your face, you might focus particularly on your jaw, the base of your tongue, roof of your mouth, your forehead, a little spot between the forehead where we frown. Relaxing throat and face. And so these are three very simple techniques that you can use pretty much wherever you go. And notice, if you will now, just notice how you're feeling, notice what's here for you, maybe notice what thoughts are in your head, what sensations you're noticing. Just letting yourself arrive into this moment. And from this place, we can focus and connect a little more fully. So during today's session, we're going to explore, we'll just do a little bit of grounding in stress. I'm not a stress educator, but we'll talk a little bit about stress. We'll cover burnout and compassion fatigue. Burnout is probably common or a term that you're familiar with. It's become very prominent in today's world. Compassion fatigue might be a term that's comes more out of healthcare or mental health care, but I'll introduce that as well. And we're going to talk just a little bit about what these terms are and maybe what that means, but hopefully more so we'll spend some time in practice or actually talk a little bit about what we can do and then experiencing some of that as well. So we're going to come back to that. And maybe just in the interest of starting this dialogue, if you would open up your chat box, and in there, maybe you could type a word or two or a phrase about what else are you expecting today? Is that what you're here for, or are you here with other expectations?
I think this is a library saying, but I think that everybody's kind of an open book. They're ready to swallow it up. No expectations, just visiting and feeling calm. So this is spot on for what people are expecting. Balance to avoid burnout. Wonderful chats coming in. I think everybody is just ready. Open book. Yes. To live a better life, to learn how to not feel so bad when we don't hear back from jobs or we don't get the answers or the responses we want. Hoping to find day to day, one task at a time to de-stress. Thank you, everybody. Posting in the chat.
Thank you for sharing. Balance to avoid burnout, new avoid points of finding peace. So tips for throughout the day. All right. Thank you all for sharing. And so I'd encourage you as we go, read each other's comments. There's always something to learn from our fellow human travelers through life. And sometimes I go to a webinar and I learn more by just reading the chat. So similarly, I'm going to ask for, one more point of input here. So in the description or the invitation to this event, it said something along the lines of maybe you're feeling burnout or overwhelmed looking for work, or maybe you're in a job feeling burnout and overwhelmed. Oh, you can't see each other's chat. Okay, well, I'll retract that comment and check in with my webinar host before I say such a thing again. Thank you. So then I'll read some of these as they come in. So what's your situation? What are you feeling? So we got one person working for themselves, which can lead to working 24 hours.
A couple people say, how do we work on the practicing patience, the self-love, going through a breakup or about to be unemployed, changes in life, transitions are always an interesting challenge that we all have. So, we have to recently go from working full-time to maybe not working or losing a job and the frustrations around that. There's some people that are feeling overwhelmed, maybe disappointed after a long job search, or when somebody in the workplace says no when they're trying to go forward with something. So we've got a few good people ready. Other people are close to retiring, and that's a whole nother chapter of life. Sometimes feeling out of place, coming from being a homemaker or raising children, and the demanding challenges of trying to be the breadwinner, and of course rejection, which is a big part of the job seeking journey. So those are a few of the
Right.
can't see each other's chats. There's some confidentiality there, but we're here to help you out. So we're ready to just, challenge it, whether you're work from home or whether you're in an office. Changing careers can be stressful.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks again. Thank you so much for sharing. And thank you, Liz, for summarizing those. So I'm going to keep moving on here. So we'll start just a little bit of what is stress. And I just grabbed two definitions here. One from the World Health Organization that says stress is a state of worry or mental tension caused by a difficult situation. And looking more closer to home here, American Psychological Association defines stress as a normal reaction to everyday pressures, but they can become unhealthy when it upsets your day-to-day functioning. So stress involves changes affecting nearly every system of the body. And so I'll just read that one more time again. Stress involves changes affecting nearly every system of the body, influencing how people feel and behave. And so stress isn't just in your head, right? It's not something that, it's not a thought that we can set aside. It's not necessarily something that's simple or abstract. It really has a full body process and experience, and that's partly why we're going to do what we do today. A couple of points that I want to make about stress, because it's so easy to come into a talk like this, or even in day-to-day conversations, to say that stress becomes synonymous with something bad, right? And not all stress is bad. There's the stress of exercise, and that's what this hormetic stress means. It's just a little bit of stress that triggers a recovery or a healing or a restoration process. And so that's how a lot of exercise work, in that we stress the body moderately, lightly or moderately, or to some level, and then that causes a healing or a rejuvenation response that is helpful for us. And I think I've read that that's how kale works too, that kale is just a little bit stressful for the body, and so the response to the stressor of kale is what makes it healthy. And another way to think about stress is a challenging goal, a challenge we set for ourselves, whether it's climbing a mountain or a tree, or going on a run, setting that 5K challenge or whatever that might be, is something that can be stressful, but it's a good stress. It's this positive stress that gets us going. So not all stress is bad. Let's just make that part of this conversation as well. So second point we might think about when we think about stress is that we can experience it differently, in the sense that there can be the acute stress of in the moment, as in, let's say, giving a webinar presentation. I'm getting a little bit used to this, but I'm a kind of person who still gets a little stressed by giving a presentation. Maybe, and so that comes and goes, right? That's the acute stress. It comes and then it goes as the event or situation changes. And sometimes those are repeated situations. Maybe it's a Monday morning team meeting, or a Sunday night. What is it? I forget what it's called, but there's a label for it that's shown up. But oh no, tomorrow's that Monday morning work day, and it's all going to come back. So episodic acute stress is something that shows up again, ebbs and flows, but might have a pattern. And then chronic stress is this building that never lets up. It just sort of slowly builds more and more and more. And as I'll repeat later, that's essentially the characteristic of burnout. And then the third item or thing to name here is that there's a difference between the stress that we experience and then the object itself. So there's the stressor, the thing that causes the stress, and then the stress is the experience that we have. And that stressor can be an object, it can be a situation or an event, like I mentioned. It can be a person, it can be an emotion, it can be a thought. So, but we use this word trigger from time to time. We might think of it as a trigger. So that's a little bit of baseline. All right, one more time in the chat, and we'll have to summarize these again because you can't see each other. So if you won't mind, what are your strategies, or how do you manage yourself when you feel stressed? It might include exercise or rest, or I guess I'm not going to say too much because I'm curious to see, how do you handle stress? And I'm just going to keep reading these as they come in here since you can't see them. So go for a walk is one. Make a plan, removing myself, going outside, maybe a mental checkout if physically moving is not an option. Sleep or rest. Internalize it, maybe compartmentalize it, go out to nature. Procrastination, save it for later. That's a favorite one of mine. Breathing, tea, meditation, reading, writing, yoga, jogging, maybe with music, working out, journaling, pushing through. I'm glad we got that one in there because that's a common one, although we don't maybe think of it as a way to cope with stress or manage stress. Ignoring the situation. All right, thank you. So that's, I'm sure that even if you wrote just one, you could probably recognize yourself in several of those. And there's a lot of common ways that we go to, and some are maybe more healthy than others. So how should we manage stress? Well, so again, I'm not an expert, and so I turned to the American Psychological Association just to kind of start us off here with, how do we cope with stress at work? What is it that we do? And they gave the following, whatever that is, 6 items to put on our list here, and there's a link so you can go there and read more fully about these descriptions. But what are those stressors or triggers that cause the stress that we experience? Developing healthy responses. And some of them we saw here or I read from the chat. So maybe that's the healthier response might be to go for a short walk rather than stress eating, which is another thing that I'm prone to do. Establishing boundaries is good advice, and it shows up here. Taking the time to recharge, learning how to relax, and talking to the supervisor. So there's what the American Psychological Association will say, and there's the link so you can read more about it. I'm not going to go through that here, not because it's not important. It's just that I'm not, that's not what this talk is about fully, or rather that's not where I want to focus my time. So I'm going to move on instead to talk about a couple or a few different specific types of work-related stress. So this term compassion fatigue was coined by a guy named Charles Figley back in 1995. He called it an acute onset of personal suffering linked to an intense sharing of another's negative emotions. It's associated with caregiving roles where people or animals suffer or experience significant emotional or physical pain. So think healthcare, think veterinarian folks, social work, mental health. But I think increasingly, as I've begun to spend more time around this work, I'm realizing that, well, this can show up for a great number of people. It might show up in journalism, it could result in the court systems, in our correction systems, in our parks and rec. It's just, almost any service job where we are interacting with humans is an opportunity to share on a personal level their intense negative emotions. So so that's sort of the broad term. It came out of healthcare or mental health. I forget, it's probably 20 to 30 years ago now, maybe something like that, closer to 30. I work with a model that defines compassion fatigue specifically as the combination of burnout and something called secondary traumatic stress. So we'll go to those definitions in a moment, but talking about, so what does compassion fatigue feel like? Here are some of the symptoms on the screen. And actually now I like that we don't see the chat, or that you can't see it. So let's turn this into one more point of feedback here. So if, as you read through these symptoms, there's, I think, 12 of them. Which of these do you experience on a weekly basis? And actually, instead of saying, sorry, so let me change my question. How many of these? So count them to yourself and then put a number in the chat. How many of these do you experience on a weekly basis? 0 to 12. We've got a pretty broad range here. A few respond with a very low number. There's also a few that respond with a very high number. We got some 10 to 12s in here, just to, share that with you. And that gets closer to the response. And then there's some in the middle. Thank you for sharing. And I hope you'll get some value out of today's webinar. When my wife and I asked that question in healthcare early childhood, usually about a third of the audience will say 6 or more. And if I look at this again, I think that is true here as well. Actually, of those of you who responded, I'd say maybe 50 to 60% said 6 or more. So half of these or more. So these are unfortunately common. And that's good to know, not just about yourself, but the people around you, right? As we, whatever the situation is, at home, at work. So here's some of what that can feel like. And maybe that got you a little bit anxious or feeling uneasy. So let's turn toward that. Let's check in again, not to enter the feeling of unease or anxiety, but simply let's notice, what do you feel? So let's do that little check-in. Feel your feet or your seat. Let your breath slow down. Maybe close your eyes if that's comfortable to you. Relax your throat and face. And as you're doing these things, notice, what do you feel in your body? What do you notice in your head? What's the emotion coming up for you? As we begin with those practices, it can take a while to notice, but with more and more practice, it becomes sort of natural to just look and notice. So this doesn't have to take a long time, but for the purposes of today, I'm going to encourage you to just be with this for another 15, 20 seconds. Just sit with this, notice breathing, sitting or standing, relaxing throat and face. What do you notice? What do you feel like? What does that feel like? Okay. So why do these check-ins? Well, the way that I think about it is it's really to increase self-awareness, right? So awareness of my current experience in this moment. I'm still a little nervous. I have a little bit of sensation of something in my chest, residual from the being nervous at the beginning. I can feel it at the very base of my throat. It's just what I'm noticing now. Okay, I can feel my feet, but also I'm feeling mostly pretty good and curious and alert. I wish I could see you all, and I wish we could have more of a dialogue, but that's not the format we're in. All right, so self-awareness is foundational for self-regulation, and some of what we're talking about here is self-regulation. And in a helping role, that's really critical, because a lot of what we do in a caregiving role or helping role is co-regulation. And so if I'm going to help you calm down or help you get a little bit more active and get moving, I have to be able to do that for myself first. So when we're calm and present, it's easier to connect with others, to establish the connection, and then we can co-regulate, and of course also just easier to focus. And the sooner we notice how we're feeling, then we can act sooner, and maybe we can deal with it before it becomes, we can work with it when it's a little ripple in the glass of water, not a full-blown storm on the ocean. If that made any sense. So, but that's why. So, okay, I'm going to get us toward a Q&A here shortly, but I'll go through some definitions of burnout and secondary traumatic stress first. So burnout, Herbert Freudenberger was the man who defined it back in the early 70s. He called it becoming exhausted by making excessive demands on energy, strength, or resources in the workplace. And so initially, and I think still today, mostly burnout is very much associated with the workplace, although increasingly we're kind of recognizing or talking about it as just a state of experience or a state of being or an experience that we have, and it can be generated outside of the workplace as well. So Christina Maslach is maybe the most famous researcher in the field of burnout. Also active from the early 70s. She defines it as a state of exhaustion in which one is cynical about the value of one's occupation and doubtful of one's ability to perform. That doesn't sound that great. And to put that a little bit differently, she and her co-collaborators and research colleagues have defined these three different categories of how it shows up. So this is not what causes it, it's how it shows up. It shows up as exhaustion. It shows up as depersonalization or cynicism, or as a distancing, removing oneself from people, from things, from the work. And due to usually negative feelings or perceptions. And there's this perceived lack of accomplishment, right? So even if I try, it's just not working. I can't do it. It does. What's the point? And I might run into that with sort of a mid-level manager to some extent, who faces change objectives and initiatives and programs and expectations from the larger organizations around budget goals, performance goals, etc. And then the reality of sort of the work in the work teams, the departments that they support, and the reality of how long the work takes, what it takes to do it well, the drain on the staff, and who's out sick today, right? So that can get into a challenging place, and that's one of the many dynamics that can result in this sort of sense of being ineffective. And then part of the job might be foreshadowing the end of our conversation, might be working with a coach to redefine what success might look like. So talk just a little bit of burnout. I mentioned that it's becoming increasingly well known and widespread. The green box has 2022 data in it. You can see that K through 12 education, followed by college or university, are very high here, or are high. Healthcare, I thought, would rank higher, but it's on whatever that is, 6 or 7. But it shows up in a number of, across organizations. And And this is how many people responded, always or very often, to just a simple question of, do you feel burned out at work? And the range here is from 1 in 5 to almost 1 in 2. That's a lot of people. And 23 data from Gallup, sort of across industries, 1 in 3 American workers feel burned out at work, always or very often. So I just think deeply that this is something that we have to do something about, and not just individually, but organizationally. But that's another topic. So that's burnout. The other component is secondary traumatic stress. That's a mouthful, so sometimes I'll say STS. It's work-related secondary exposure to extremely or traumatically stressful events. So it's not your trauma directly. Think of it maybe as the person in the emergency room or the emergency department of the hospital. Here comes, people in from their lives might have been, suffered a vehicle accident or some, or other violent event, and they directly experience the trauma. Healthcare staff now work with that person. That's the secondary or indirect exposure. It's rooted in an empathetic engagement, wanting to take care of and feeling with, and it results in this acute stress disorder that's similar to PTSD. And even already in 2009, that was recognized in the most recent version of the diagnostic manual that healthcare workers use to diagnose mental unhealth, I should say. It's accepted, or it's recognized as a form of a PTSD. And in some professions, this is a natural consequence. So if you think about it like that emergency room department type of role, it might be a natural consequence that this is going to show up in working with victims of abuse or sexual abuse. This is going to be a natural consequence. Working with people with, who have fled their home country and are refugees in this country. There's a reason they fled. There's this traumatic past. Working with these people, this is a natural consequence of much of these types of work. And so I just want to make that point clear so that we can be aware of it and take it into account when we manage ourselves, and when we develop organizations that support people truly. There's the PTSD symptom clusters. I'm not going to talk through those, but they're in the PowerPoint if you'd like to look through this later. Let's do another check-in. So, and then I think we're finally at a Q&A. So we'll add on a little bit, but starting where we were, first just noticing. And if maybe you'd like to stand up, if you've been sitting, you're welcome to stand or take another shape. Feel your feet or your seat. Relax your throat and face. Maybe close your eyes. Let your exhale lengthen. And then shape your breath so that it's an even breath. You might count to 3 or 4 or 5 or something to help set the pace, and you'll count the same number on the inhale and the exhale. So maybe you're counting to 1, 2, 3, 4 on each inhale and on each exhale. But find what's a natural breath for you, or a natural length, I should say, because your natural breath may not be equal length for inhale and exhale, but that's what we're looking for now. I won't go into all other reasons, but essentially what we're doing, think of maybe like a little old-fashioned volume dial, and you have a volume button where you can turn it from 0 to 10, and this is your stress level. And some of us might be a little stuck. Maybe it's on a high setting of 7 or 8 or so, or thereabouts. And maybe the dial is a little stuck. So this practice of breathing evenly is like putting a little WD-40 on that dial and just wiggling a little up, a little down, wiggle, 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 wiggle. We're just trying to make that dial begin to turn again. That's what this first part is for. If you need a little bit more calming in your life, or in this moment, I should say, not in your life generally, but in this moment, if you're still a little revved up, maybe a little worried, anxious, restless, you might extend your exhale, maybe making the exhale longer, only the exhale. Maybe you count to 6 or even 8 on your exhale, not by keep counting faster, by the way, but extending your exhale unto a count of 6 or 8. You might think of this as a sigh. The body has this natural relaxing response built in with a sigh. And if you're the other end of this, you might feel like a little logy or I don't want to say depressed because it introduces other language, but if you're feeling like you could need a bit of an energy boost, it's been not a very, you're in this moment, you're feeling more down, fatigued, you might need a little more energy, and you might extend the inhale. And same thing there, you could extend to a count of 6, maybe even 8. The inhale helps bring a little more energy. And the body has a natural activator with the breath. In the gasp is an energizing response. So if you did one or the other, lengthening inhale or exhale, let's return to that even breath. 1, 2, 3, 4 on both inhale and exhale. Breathing evenly. We'll just end again with that little wiggle of the dial. And if your eyes are closed, feel free to open them or feel free to keep them closed. I'm going to move on and take us out of that practice. All right. So that's quite a bit. So let's see, what questions do you have?
I don't think we have a lot of questions. I noticed I was breathing and my feelings were, I was a little cold. So I had to go grab a scarf. And I think that teaching these breathing techniques are so powerful. And as we're giving the audience a chance to type in any questions that they might have, what comes to mind is that when we're introduced to a potentially stressful situation, we should keep in mind that it's potentially stressful if we choose how to respond to it. And by taking a deep breath and slowing down, kind of like back in the day where, I don't know if your parents ever said, take a break, count to 10, don't blow your top. Don't, get too stressed out. Just take a deep breath. And how powerful it is to do exactly that, to take a quick breath before responding or before reacting. So there's a comment, we have a question coming in. So is breathing the only thing that you can share to solve the stress problem? Because it is very soothing. It is very helpful. It's a calming sensation. It's a start. And I always tell people it's the easiest thing that you have at your disposal all the time is take a deep breath. What are some of your other thoughts on that, Anders?
I think that this is the way that I think of the breath. So there's, of course, yes, there's more things that we can do. I think of the breath as a really good starting point. It helps reset, and kind of the part of the intention of this is to not only go to the crisis moment, because we're trying to prevent the crisis moment with some of these practices. And so by trying to get to, by introducing practices of self-awareness and noticing a little sooner, then we can take a more gentle approach or a little more subtle approach, and maybe we won't ramp up as high. Those occasions will happen, and the breath is not going to be the only thing that will work in those situations.
Yeah. There are a couple questions in the Q&A.
Yep.
One person said, well, any suggestions on how to not feel bad when you do get rejection or recruiters don't respond back, you get ghosted? Any thoughts on that?
Oh, sorry. What happened?
The Q&A is it's a little bit different because either the two people that have put in that first question about, how to not feel bad about rejection, and the recruit. I mean, I can kind of answer to that, being the career coach that I am, is that I always tell my clients, maybe it's not a no, it could be a not now. So if you went through the interview process, you applied, they may have gone with an internal candidate, they may have gone with somebody else. But I always tell my clients, respond back in 2 or 3 months, because those first 30, 60, 90 days, maybe that wasn't the right fit for that person. But circle back. Don't feel bad about it. Don't burn a bridge, but to sort of, offer up, hey, I'm just following up. I know that I went through the interview process, that you might have gone in a different direction, but maybe I can help you with a different project. There's a couple other questions in here that I'll throw back to Anders. How to learn to self-regulate those heavy emotions, especially when you're at work, when there's a time when you don't have the opportunity to take a break, you can't calm down. Any other advice on self-regulating those heavy emotions?
Self-regulating heavy emotions. I think the single best answer that I have to that is to connect with somebody and talk about it. And whether that's a peer or a colleague, or it's a good friend, or whether it's a counselor or a coach.
I love it.
So I have a few more slides, and if we don't have a lot of questions, maybe I will go through those.
We do have, there's one who says how to not feel drained when applying to jobs. Sometimes I say, give yourself a reward. Each time you've applied to a job, you've hit the send button, treat yourself to a walk around the block, or treat yourself to, a healthy snack. Go ahead and push through doing what you have to do so you can do what you want to do. And then there's a comment about Alanis Morissette is a sensitive personality. And she, there's a documentary about her that somebody's recommending. And that sometimes some people are more affected by a situation that they're more sensitive to. And I think this is a great workshop for not just taking care of ourselves, but as we interact with other people, knowing that other people's sensitivity levels are kind of on a spectrum. So this example that was given in the Q&A says, sometimes seeing homeless people can really upset some people, and other people, that's not a trigger for them. And so some people worry more, some people worry less. Any thoughts on that?
I guess my first thought is that we are who we are, and yeah, I'm just becoming familiar with this sort of term of highly sensitive people, and I guess I don't love the label, but I realize that I am one. But I think it's recognizing, increasingly accepting who we are and how we react, and then not judging that as bad. And it's sort of almost maybe a silly answer, but it's yes, some people react more strongly than others, and maybe that's just the way it is, but maybe it's worth then looking at it, kind of going back to this, what is the trigger? Well, one, what is my reaction? What am I reacting to? Okay, and maybe I can manage that reaction a bit, but also, what is it about this thing that I'm reacting to, and talking through that might be useful. And I saw something about how else can we, sorry, I don't want to jump to a different question, Liz. I almost did there, so I'll pull myself back.
I think you answered that nicely. And I know, because I know what your slides are, that I know that some of the slides that you have coming up are actually going to answer some of the questions in here about, how do you feel not drained with compassion fatigue? So I think you can keep going through the slides, and then we'll have a little bit of time at the end for some more questions. So
Great. I want to say two things before I jump in about the breath. And yes, this is, I don't want to, say that breathing will solve all your problems, but this is a surprisingly powerful tool that you always have with you. I guess I'm saying three things. At a former employer, they were reminding people of this. And so they put outside exam rooms, they put a little notice that pause, breathe, heal. And to give us that reminder, right? It's one thing to know this stuff. You all probably know most of what I'm saying here today. The invitation is to not just know it, but practice it. And then, because Liz, you said take a deep breath, it's a half of a recommendation. Take a deep breath in, cues us to inhale. That is activating. If we're already stressed, then we take a deep breath in and maybe even hold it. That might make all of that feeling way bigger and worse. Exhale. That deep breath wants to release. So whenever you think or of saying somebody, hey, just take a deep breath, you want to add, and then breathe out slowly. All right.
Don't just breathe in and get choked up. Remember to breathe out. Thank you for that reminder.
Exactly. All right. So again, I'm kind of thinking there's, I want to shape this a little bit as sort of a 3 levels or a couple of levels. So of what we can do, right? So at the very foundation of all of this is self-care. And I don't want to just talk about self-care, but I want to name it. And I want to define it a little bit more. I don't think of massage or necessarily spa retreats or these sort of what is self-care, what is treating myself, and where might I get into spoiling myself? Those are different things. The basic self-care is what your primary care doctor will ask you about. What's, how much sleep and rest do you get? What's your diet, nutrition, exercise, social connections, not smoking and using alcohol or other recreational substances in a limited and managed way, right? So basic self-care is necessary, and I will say that it's also a responsibility as professionals. And it's necessary to function in a stressful environment, but that's really just the beginning. So we can learn skills through practice to get better at what we're doing, right? So if our job is to lift, maybe we want to learn proper lifting technique. If the work is helping, caring, connecting, there's some proper techniques of that. And some of the foundational stuff of that is simply to be present. So skill building would be the next level over. And what are those skills? So some of those skills, and I'm giving you sort of this is a pretty high level overview today. We're doing a few little practices, but here are some things that that I want to invite you to consider skills that you can practice. So if you think of, what do these roles have in common at the background of the screen, right? There's a certain level of awareness that happens to be there. And when I say awareness here, I mean more awareness of what's happening, big, broad, open, as well as awareness of my own body that gets into that third bullet, embodiment. So we can work with that. These are skills that we can practice, and we can practice awareness and embodiment. We can practice concentration, that more narrow focus, right? And this is helpful because by practicing these skills and training in these ways, we learn the skills of navigating in situations. Then we can learn specific stress management techniques, which is not my curriculum, but looking at, okay, well, how do we some more of that? And then self and co-regulation. I do want to name maybe kind of, let's see, I don't know that I have it in here anywhere else, so I'll put it in here. The kind of going back to this idea of stress and these things, and the stress, or rather the difference between stress and stressor. So there's a great book by 2 doctors, Nagoski, Emily and Amelia Nagoski, and they wrote the book Burnout. And I forget what the subtitle is, but you can find them, Nagoski and Burnout. But they talk about completing the stress cycle, right? So the stressor, the event, the circumstance, the person, the thing, triggers a very normal, natural response in our body. And it's not just an event, it's a process. It often starts with that upregulation, as I say, or the activation. We get stressed, we get maybe anxious, worried, or that's not what this, anyway, I guess that might be the start, right? A stressful situation evokes that response. We have to let the body complete sort of this normal, natural response to stress, which might involve moving in some way and then returning to safety. So, if you think about that sort of hypothetic lion on the savannah moment, that's the trigger. We get the stress, which is healthy and helpful because we want to be able to get away from the lion. But that involves that moment of activity, and it involves arriving back into safety, presumably, so that there's a process, there's cues and triggers, and we can learn how we individually best make our way through that stress response cycle. And so if I get stressed at work, maybe that walk around the block, maybe it's not a quiet walk, maybe it's not a peaceful walk, maybe it's a really hard walk, so I can work off some of my frustration or energy or however I think about that in order for me to complete the stress cycle. And then maybe I'll smile at somebody and they'll smile back at me, and now I get that, oh, the smile, the connection helps provide cues of safety. Maybe I'll go by the coffee shop and smell the smell of baking cookies and food also helps me know that I'm in a safe place. And so yes, we don't always have time to walk around the block, but just as an example of how part of managing the stress is recognizing how to release some of the tension in shorter cycles and sometimes in longer cycles. So I was going to do one more here, and let's maybe we'll do it a little bit differently. Yeah, let's do it a little bit differently. So you might have heard of a body scan, and sometimes they take a really long time. And we're not going to take a really long time. We're just going to do another simple awareness practice. And so most of these practices that we're doing today, I think, or let's see, we're doing awareness and then we're doing some regulation with the breath. But if you find that comfortable position, relax your throat, your face, notice your breath, and then bring your attention to your feet. Just notice, what do you feel in your feet? And we'll try to, as best we can, ignore everything else and just let attention rest in the feet. What do you feel in your feet? And then letting go of that, what do you feel in your lower legs? What do you feel in your calves? Maybe right one, left one, or left one and right one, or both at the same time. Just notice, what do you feel? What do you feel in your thighs? Let your lower legs go, drop out of awareness, focusing only on thighs. What do you feel in your thighs? What does that feel like? What do you feel in your seat? What do you feel in your hips? What do you feel in your lower belly, around your waist? What do you feel in your rib cage as you breathe? What do you feel in your shoulders? What do you feel in your arms? What do you feel in your hands and fingers? What do you feel in your neck and throat? What do you feel in your face? And then let that go. Maybe turn your attention to your breath or to the sensation in your feet or seat. And if your eyes are closed, you might open them. So, little breath practice, 3 fundamentals, a little awareness practice. Those are some simple things that we're doing today. So, more broadly then, and all right, so don't skip self-care. I guess that's the purpose of the foundation of that slide, right? And so for many people in coaching work, frankly, when we come to the topic of burnout, the first conversation is often around sleep. Very, very many professionals, I think, in our world today, or in at least in this country, a lot of people are operating on too little sleep. And it's one of the first things that we sacrifice. And so working on getting enough sleep, I'm not saying that's easy. That's not my point. It's not low-hanging fruit. It's just a high priority. So make sure that you get enough sleep. You might think of how you can complete that stress response cycle. And then find a practice, find a practice for you that will resonate for you. For some, it's meditation or yoga. For others, it's not those things. My wife is one of those folks. And it's nothing against her or other people who don't care for yoga or meditation. Because you don't have to do those things. It's just finding a practice where we can work with awareness or concentration, maybe working on relaxing, something that can get you embodied. I've spoken with people who swim a lot, and they have some interesting things to say about the experience of swimming, about how they feel the water, how they listen to the water, how they look at the patterns of light on the bottom of the pool as they swim. Again, swimming may not be for everybody, but it's just another example. Sometimes it's gardening, and sometimes it's just finding a way to make folding laundry, for me, has become a mindfulness practice in a way, because it can be very satisfying. But find a practice that will help or support you in practicing some of these skills. You might try a mindfulness app like Healthy Minds. That's the one that I find myself recommending. It's a free app. It's based on research from one or more of the premier centers in the country, and it's also generating their research. It's data for their research. And so I think it's a wonderful way to not only benefit from their knowledge, but contribute to their developing knowledge. And then, because I am a coach, I would also very strongly recommend that anybody who wants to work on this stuff work with a coach, a counselor, or a therapist. And I would say, if you felt yourself, if you can recognize yourself in compassion fatigue, in many of these symptoms, then or if you just know that secondary traumatic stress is something that you're living with, I would say don't seek out a coach, because PTSD is a known and increasingly well understood mental health condition, or a human condition that skilled therapist or mental health support is required for. That's not the right territory for a coach, in my opinion. But working with burnout and all of these other topics, I think, is wonderful as a coach. So find somebody to work with, and that kind of leads me to the next slide. So if you're in an employment situation, or if you're looking for an employer, what might you look for? You could look for, do they offer an employee assistance program or an EAP, which typically includes access to free counseling, not for life, but a number of free sessions per year, usually. And something that I've seen organizations do under or due to COVID was to increase the number. It's not that they got the new EAP or a better EAP, but they expanded from maybe 5 or 6 sessions a year to some greater number that was available to their staff free of charge. And by the way, EAPs sometimes have other really cool benefits that people don't know about. So look into that. Or you might look to see, hey, are there coaches to support job performance, to support the professional development or leadership development in the organizations that you're in? Do they offer training or professional development programs to help people manage stress or burnout? If the organization, this may be a little tongue in cheek, but if your organization or where you're working or looking to find work talks about trauma-informed approaches, you might maybe, a little gently see if you can initiate a conversation about, how that trauma-informed lens is applied to the staff, to the employees. And there are other things that you can do. So some things, these are just some of my thoughts around things you might look for as you seek jobs, or as you look around in your current organization for what additional supports might be there for you. Right, so I think that takes me to the end of these slides, Liz. And let's see, do we have any more questions?
These are great. And I love that list that you put out there. And I also know that some of us feel like, well, we're not working. And there's a part of me that wants to encourage those of you that are looking for work to don't think about work as just the paid occupation. Think about opportunities for you to help. Are there any opportunities to volunteer? Are there any organizations that pique your curiosity that maybe you're in a situation where you could mentor somebody else, or you speak a second language, or you can volunteer at your kid's school or go back to the school that you went to and tutor a class? Because I think that that's a big part of the self-care, is figuring out what's going to help you. And certainly there's a lot of research out about loneliness and a lot of research out there about disconnecting. And so we can all take responsibility to, of our own bodies to sleep well, exercise, eat well, but can we go a little bit further and help somebody else with some of those day-to-day tasks? So even if you're not working, is there an opportunity that you can give back? So I always like to chime in on that one.
Yeah, and connection just seems to be the researchers in this field seem to point to connection as one of the first interventions, whether it's sort of individual or for organizations, but looking to facilitate connection. And of course, that's a challenge in many jobs, right? And we've just been through a major change to the workplace and how we work, and we're still finding our way, and that's going to be normalizing over the next several years in remote versus personal. It's going to be very interesting. But so connection can look in different ways, and we can create connection virtually, but it takes effort in both virtual and in-person settings.
Yeah, and here we are. We've connected for an hour, and I feel better than when we first started. I feel warmer and connected, and I've taken a few good notes here myself. I love the question in the chat: is screaming a good stress relief? And my thoughts on that are, as long as you're not screaming at somebody, or if you're driving in your car and you want to crank the radio and start screaming, that makes you feel good, go for it. What do you think?
I think that sounds great. Yeah, I love it. I think there's something called primal scream therapy. I haven't tried it. I can't vouch for it, but it seems related to this idea. And absolutely, I mean, it's the release of energy, right? Whether it's through movement or maybe through screaming, I think that can be a really fun way. And I think there was a couple of answers around the app. So it's called Healthy Minds. The app is just called Healthy Minds. I know I've checked, it's in the Google store, it's in the Apple store, and it's free. And it has, I like it because it has a training program. It's not just a big menu of choices that I personally get lost in. I have a lot of opinions on too many choices, but it's a guided path. It'll take you through a sequence of steps and take you through their curriculum, which I think is really great.
Well, and that's one thing I love about this audience, is that these are library people. And so the people that have logged on, and we had over 50 people today, that you want to learn. You're just always trying to stretch your mental capacity and learn something new and get a little nugget of inspiration. And hopefully you have a library that's in your community, and maybe you're a regular at the library and you've got a librarian you can chat with, or a friend you can take to the library with you, or meet people at the library. But I just love the fact that there's so much to learn. And I love the fact that Anders uses the term practice, that we're always practicing. It's funny, I think about, lawyers are practicing lawyers. They're always learning. They're always growing. And here we are, even if we're not working, we're always learning. And there's always something else that we can learn about, whether it's a simple breathing technique that we've given you. And beyond the breathing, it's touching the floor, putting our feet on the floor. And then that's something I do when I can't sleep at night, is I'll start at the bottom and I'll say, relax toes, and I'll squeeze them up, and then I'll just relax them. And I'll walk through my own head, all parts of my body. And sometimes I don't even remember if I get past my shoulders and up to my ears, but just these are great little tools and tips that you've shared with us today. So thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I'll just encourage you all to I know that some of these things can seem so basic and simple, it's easy to dismiss them because we might try them once and it doesn't solve this big problem in front of us. Well, of course it doesn't, right? I'm not going to have a new boss just because I breathe differently. My boss isn't going to be nice to me just because I breathe differently, or my workload isn't going to shrink. But I can begin to manage my stress, and that allows me to better engage with the situation at hand. And there's a cumulative effect, and that's really why I thank you, Liz, for emphasizing the practice here. It's not a fix in the moment. It's about building a new baseline from which we respond differently.
Right. Absolutely. And I think I also appreciated what you said early on in the conversation about there's different people need different things. And I think in our lives, at different stages of our lives, what helped me reduce stress when I was younger might have been running or more physical activity. Now that I'm a little bit older, I'm finding that reading books is a relaxation for me. So, practicing different things and then trying different things. And if it works for you, try more of it. And if it's not working, try something else. There is another question in the Q&A. Have you had a chance to look at that, Anders? This is
not, but to piggyback off what you just said, that practice is so well supported with a coach. How would I go about finding a good studio, yoga studio or instructor that won't cost a lot? I would look around in the community for maybe there's studios that offer classes by donation is something to look at. Whether or not that's coupled with good instruction, I couldn't say. Generally, I always encourage somebody who is interested in exploring yoga to try multiple teachers and go with the ones that seem to work for you. That makes for a good practice. It can be very individual. And also, I'd say maybe stay open to having a few, because there's many different types of yoga, some of which are highly complementary.
That's a really good point. It's a little bit of try different places. Yoga at a YMCA is going to be very different than yoga at a senior citizen center. And certainly and I think I read if you've taken a fall lately, somebody else says there's free yoga on Wednesdays and Fridays at the Grand Park in downtown LA. And I know, somebody else said, don't underestimate the power of YouTube. I think it was during the pandemic that I actually had my favorite yoga YouTube video, and I cut and pasted the prompt so that each week I would see the prompt show up in my calendar and I'd watch the same video, and I got better and better and better at the same free video. So that's another good suggestion. Oh, Eventbrite, meditation breathing events that are virtual and in person. So thank you. All right. Anders, thank you so much for being our guest today. I know that you're going to give the slides, and I know Oleg's going to wrap us up. So I just want to say thank you to the audience for being here. And thank you, Anders, for presenting. And I'll turn it back over to Oleg.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm just tickled that somebody took advantage of Anders' specialty or his knowledge to ask a question about the yoga studio. That's very on point. I like that. I love how apt our audience is. Once again, Liz, I echo your gratitude to you, to Anders, and to our fantastic audience for participating, asking questions, and just being here with us. I do have a small request. As I usually ask after our work ready events, we have a post-event survey. It's very, very short. It asks a few questions, and we very much read the surveys, and sometimes I respond to them and appreciate the few moments that you spend answering it. So I just post the post-event survey link in the chat. So if you can click on that and fill that out, it would be very much appreciated. Once again, thank you, Liz, thank you, Anders, and thank you all out there. We'll see you next time.